You guys just segued and rolled right into it, and I want to keep the conversation stimulated, but on a different question, a different level. Is homeownership still the American dream?
Yes.
NAR's head economist Larry Yoon and a speaker for the National Association of Home Builders recently came out and said that, yes, there's been surveys, and it's still the American dream, but
Absolutely.
we tend to have conversations a lot about whether or not that's true. Is owning a home still the American dream, meaning do the millennials and the next level of homeowners feel like owning a house is the pinnacle of success?
I think everybody, if you go to every person and you say, if you could afford it, if you had the option, would you prefer to rent or would you prefer to own your own home? I would say, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 100% of people will say I would rather own my own home. Okay? I think the reason why people are being hesitant is because they're unsure. They're skeptical of either the market, people who are in it, or they're unsure of their own security as far as, money, my job, stuff like that. So I think it's still the dream. I think people are just not sure if it's an attainable dream at this point.
But,
for them.
I mean, I'll throw back at you that we all talk about this, and I am convinced that it's actually cheaper right now to purchase a home than it is to rent a home. In most cases, you could use what you would have otherwise used as a deposit, first and last, blah, 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 as a down payment on a home and have your monthly payment be less than what your rent would be. And by the way, you're building equity. So as we sit here today, it is financially, economically a better choice to buy a home than rent it, yet the rentals are out of control and home buying is basically flatlined.
Well,
so
you're committing.
How does that happen?
Well, because you're committing.
You're not committed to sell it.
No, when you purchase
a year
home,
later, sell it. You're committed to a 1-year rental lease or
in some areas, you could purchase now and you may still be losing value later in particular areas. So that building equity, that's not a for sure thing, one. But two, I think it is. You're committing to a 30-year fixed loan or something like that. It's more permanent. And what if your job, you may not have job security. You may not. I really think it comes down to each person's household and how they feel confident about their income and about their situation.
Yeah, but if you lose your job and you're in a rental, you're going to get kicked out. If you lose your job and you own the home,
but you don't get a foreclosure on
you can take up to 3 years to go through a foreclosure process.
But you're not going to get sued by the bank.
Am I right?
3 years before I get there sometimes.
I'm just telling you the way it is. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not judging. I'm saying
there's an emotional
attachment to a home.
It's an emotionally devastating to have your home foreclosed on, to lose your home after.
Do you really think it's really emotionally devastating?
It's a lot worse than losing your job and not being able to afford renting. You move in with your parents and blah blah blah. Whatever happens,
like you said,
and I think that's what scares people right now.
Number one on the list of dreams for most Americans is owning the home. So of course, there's the nightmare of losing the home. It's emotional both ways. But going back to what Elisa said is, I think that home ownership is still the number one dream, the number one goal. But this atmosphere we're living in, it's also the number one
risk.
It's not just the number one risk, but it emotional and psychological wise, it just seems like the cards are so stacked against you much more than 5 years ago to own a home. It seems like it's so much more difficult, even though the rates are there and everything's in line for you to go out and buy a home. The homes are cheaper. It just seems like such a bigger, more scary thing to do nowadays because of our economic environment.
All right, I'm going to throw the booth the biggest curveball I've thrown anybody at this point. Frank, while you were talking and you were saying that you still believe that owning a home is the American dream, our student producer, Evan, over here to my right, was nodding his head yes. Evan, why were you nodding your head?
I don't know. That just seems like a really big commitment, and it's kind of like the completion of the American dream sort of thing. You know, everybody wants to have their home that they own and stuff. So, yeah, it's obviously a big issue. Yeah.
Do you have that dream of owning a home someday?
Maybe someday. Right now, I'm still in the rental phase, so
he's like, I'm trying to
quite have enough money to think about owning one yet.
I'd like to introduce you to a good lender right over here to right.
Son of a gun! Look at that.
But if you could,
you're what, 22?
Almost 21.
21. He's 21, and he's shaking his head. He's saying yes. So, I mean, obviously this is not a sample group does not one make. However,
but right now there are things that are taking precedence over the homeownership. I think people right now just want to know that they can put food on the table, have a job, you have a roof over their head, whether it's rented or purchased.
But Frank, if my house payment is $900 a month and my rent would have been $1,300 a month, I have $400 a month more to put food on the table and to put gas in my tank.
I know, but I think
it's the commitment that people are concerned about.
It's the commitment process to rent. You go out, you fill out your application, you get your credit checked, and you get in there. You don't have to go through an escrow, which they say getting married, getting divorced, and getting audited, and then going through escrow. Some very painful moments in your life, You don't have to go through that process.
First. Well, Monique, if you're listening, he didn't really mean that.
And there's also two parts of it. Is it the American dream? I think absolutely. I think Elisa absolutely nailed it. But then the second part of that is, then why aren't more people taking advantage of it?
Yes.
And I think that is where you're going to come up with just...
And they're seeing people lose their homes left and right, and it's just such this scary image. Could I be that same person in 5 years from now?
I don't want to be in the same spot as this person, right? And that's what it is. It's just fear. It's the future, the unknown.
And when you're afraid, you don't make logical decisions.
And they don't feel like... I don't think that they feel like what went wrong has been fixed.
Yeah, I agree.
So
that's a good point.
They don't trust in the system.
That's what I'm saying. They're skeptical.
They think it's going to crash again. How much more can you crash? Seriously,
who expected it to crash this much?
There are millions that were foreclosed on in the past 3 years that if things had gone through the natural order may not have foreclosed, and that's in the millions.
And you know what? This is actually a little bit of an unfair fear, because there's no question that there was a large percentage of those foreclosures were
the buyers weren't qualified anyway.
Right, they weren't qualified, and they knew it, and they were taking advantage of the situation, and they were overextending themselves to try to get rich quick with all of these different things, trying to flip houses. So consumers created this. If the demand wasn't there, it never would have happened. So even though just because mom and dad turned their heads and weren't watching, consumers threw a party, and they went crazy, and now we're going through a hangover.
So is the emotional stuff good or bad?
It's good to be cautious going into it, but I think it's much greater than the reality of the situation. I think a lot of the really bad stuff that consumers hear about are because people were taking advantage of the system at the time, and now it just corrected itself. Because those loans never should have happened. People never should have taken those loans. They never should have signed a paper that said that they make this much money when they didn't. Yeah. And they abused the system.
And we're a nation of credit, basically. And back then they knocked down the tier or the standard of what your credit should be in order to get a home. And basically said, anybody and everybody should have a home and blah, 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 But they took away the standard. When you reduce the standard, then you open the door for all these millions of people who truly just absolutely weren't ready at the time.
Right. And I don't think you can nail this on one person, because it takes two to tango.
I can. Two people.
It takes two to tango.
I'll tell you who they are next week.
Ooh, there's a tease. Frank's going to tell us the two people who are responsible for the crash.
A couple of Congress
of the real estate industry.
No,
hold it for next week. Frank, in radio, this is called the tease. Okay, you did well. Now don't screw it up. Next week, Frank is going to give us the names of two people, right?
At least a couple of people that I think are...
Should we get Secret Service protection for Frank? Because this sounds big.
This is big.
You mentioned congressman.
All right, we got about 10 minutes left of the show, so we want to get into the mailbag because it's everybody's favorite part of the show.
Can we do the show over again?
We can talk about this American Dream thing again. Okay, because
do it over and erase this one.
It's a rant. No, we can't erase this one because it's a good topic.
It's on record.
No, that was a great
I think it's important. We talked about the emotion, but generally speaking, if you take the emotion out of it and just get real like we do, I think there's an argument to be made. But we can do it again. We can talk about the American Dream stuff again. That's not